Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Chronic here on this Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be taking a look at my favorite Warlock Exotics in Destiny 2. And of course, as always, this is a completely subjective video based on my opinion and the opinion of my buddies Diz and Zoomzy, who also helped me get the gameplay for PvP you can see on screen, linked to their Twitch in the description down below. And as such, you're going to have a differing opinion. Please let me know in the comments down below what you like and why, so that I can update my list the next time I do it. And of course, as always, I have made a spreadsheet for this video that will be seen throughout this video. If you wanted to get your hands on it, it is fully public for you guys to use over at my Discord server, link in the description down below, in the channel #spreadsheetsdocs, where you can find all of my spreadsheets and all my docs. And of course, as always, these spreadsheets really would not be possible without my patrons on Patreon. And I kid you not, there was a point in time where I would have had to stop doing spreadsheets if it weren't for the support that I had on Patreon. Because the fact is, they take 10 to 20 hours every single week, and I make absolutely no money from them. So if you want to see these spreadsheets continue, please check a link to my Patreon in the description down below. And I guess as a bit of a thank you, I actually have a giveaway going on right now of an Astro A10 headset and a Blue Yeti microphone. If you wanted to enter, link in the description down below. And the last thing I want to say before I get into the main section is I know that there's going to be a patch coming next Tuesday that's going to be changing a bunch of things about stasis for all the different classes, including some buffs and nerfs for the Warlock. And for the most part, this list should still be mostly the same. The exotics themselves are not going to be changing by too much. And if you didn't know, the way I rank these exotics is a combination of the actual perk the exotic gives and how many times it is actually used because of a subclass that's really strong. A good example would be the Helmsane 14. The perk on it itself is really not that good, but it is used a lot because Bubble is great. Moving on to the main section of the video, let's go ahead and take a deep dive into the spreadsheet. And as you can see on screen right now, this is my spreadsheet. All of its dark theme, color-coded, pictured out, perk recommendations, or I guess mod recommendations, PvE and PvP, all the different things I could possibly come up with for every single Warlock exotic in the game. And again, you can get your hands on it in my Discord server, link in the description down below. Now obviously I don't really do these videos like a lot of other people. I'm not going to just be going through the top 10. If you want to know what my favorites are, just go for it. Use Phoenix Protocol. But the reasons why these top 10 items are so good and the reasons why other items are not as good and not as meta is going to be important for your understanding Destiny 2 in the meta. So I'm going to start off by briefly going over the non-ranked items first and then moving on through the top 10. I will try to be very brief. So if you have further questions, let me know in the comments down below. Right, so let's go ahead and get started. First and foremost, we have the Apotheosis Veil. You get a number of ability regeneration from casting your super, and technically something not a lot of people know about is this exotic is guaranteed to have above like 12 intelligence. I just don't know when I'd want this. Transverse, an exotic that has a high skill floor, high skill ceiling that could absolutely dump on you in the Crucible. However, Void is not really that strong in the Crucible at the moment. Crown of Tempest actually used to be at the #1 best exotic in the game, really good for ability regeneration, increasing the length of your Storm Trance. However, ever since they nerfed the Arc Web and generally Arc not being powerful for either mode, and the preference of using Geomags, that crown has fallen quite a ways. Still a good exotic, just not top 10 worth. Dawn Chorus, an exotic that released last season that people were very excited about, the first exotic we ever got that works with Daybreak specifically. However, the burn effect, the duration, and the extra damage and regeneration just doesn't feel powerful enough as compared to some of the other options. Like straight up in PvE, the burn damage does next to nothing. Felwinter's Helm. The big issue with this exotic is that the big disorienting explosion burst comes from your body and not from your target. If you're using a ranged melee, you want it to come from your target because otherwise you're right next to a lot of enemies and that's very dangerous. Skull of Dharamkara. Very close to being in the top 10 because it is based on a very strong super that works in Grandmasters. However, again, Void is not the strongest these days, and there are definitely other Void options like Controvers and Nezrix that do better. I don't necessarily think this needs a buff. However, maybe some things need to change. The Stag requires you to either be critically wounded or it leaves a rift on your corpse to help with your revive, but in the highest level play, you have a timer on your death. The Verity's Brow, an exotic that was very close to being in the top 10. Energy weapon kills are easy enough to get a number of grenade bonuses of damage, regeneration, and give your teammates a lot more generation as well. However, it's very inconsistent. It seems the radius is not that significant. And honestly, I do need help with this exotic. I can't really figure out exactly what's going on with it. Sometimes it feels terrible, sometimes it doesn't. The Getaway Artist gives you that sentient Arc Soul auto turret on your shoulder, which is much better than the regular one from the subclass Rift, and technically can be refreshed with that Rift thing. However, in a lot of scenarios, I'd rather just use a grenade, and Arc is not really that powerful of a subclass. Necrotic Grip. There's a lot of hype going on with Necrotic Grip, a lot of people really liking this, but it does require you to either get melee hits, because it's not any damage, or use the Thorn, which is good in PvP, but it does keyhole you into using the Thorn, and there are so many other exotics that I might prefer. The Sunbracers, a very fun exotic for infinite grenades, but it does depend on getting a melee kill, and even with Celestial Fire, that can be a bit touchy and not do enough damage. The Winter's Guile depends on getting melee kills for melee damage, and it's just not enough to do enough. One of those exotics that has no place because if it does enough, it's too much. Chromatic Fire, which can be used on many different builds to enhance certain kinetic weapons to give you solar damage explosions for Warmind cells, but you could oftentimes just use an energy weapon with Dragonfly. In my opinion, it's not worth an exotic slot. It is a lot of fun though. Sanguine Alchemy, in contention for one of the worst exotics in the game, allowing your rifts to last longer just by getting kills on them. And it does not work with the Well. If it worked with the Well, it might be close to the top 10, but not overpowered. Starfire Protocol, in my opinion, a very underrated exotic, allowing you to get double grenades, which can be used with Attunement Grace for double healing grenades, which can lead to a lot more interactions with healing your teammates, allowing you to get a lot more grenades, a lot more rifts, and be a lot better of a healing support. Decent replacement for Phoenix Protocol if you don't have it. Storm Dancer's Brace. Increase the damage as a super that does so little damage in the first place it's not worth it, and it's not enough. Vespers of Radius. In my opinion, the better version of the Stag because it doesn't require you to be critically wounded, and you get that little stumbling effect if you put down your Rift, which helps on keeping you alive. Wings of Sacred Dawn. Again, another one of those high skill floor, high skill ceiling exotics that can lead to some insane locations. You can snipe people hovering midair with extra resistance and Icarus dashing out of there. It is pretty difficult to use though. And finally, Promethean Spur, probably the worst exotic in the game because there is literally no circumstance where I would see a field of rifts while my teammate is killing everybody with their super that I go, this is what I want. I don't want it. It's net positive, but there's no scenario that I want it. My teammate's killing everybody anyways. Moving on, let's go ahead and get into the honorable mentions and the top 10. First up for an honorable mention, we have the Karnstein Armlets, an exotic that a lot of people really like that works well with a lot of different light-based melees that really do well in the meta, like Celestial Fire, allowing you to get a lot of health back and regenerate a lot of your health very quickly just by getting a melee kill, which is not that difficult. However, because Stasis is the current #1 subclass for a lot of people, that melee attack does not often get that many kills. Most of the time, you're going to be freezing them and killing them with your weapon. So this exotic doesn't get procced as often. On top of the fact that 120 RPM hand cannons are more popular these days, as opposed to the past where 150 hand cannons, that extra amount of health regeneration may have actually increased the number of shots it takes to kill you, where nowadays the 120s are so powerful, it's still going to be 3 shots. For the other honorable mention, we have the Mantle of Battle Harmony, which again was very close to being in the top 10. Personally, I do need some more time with it before I can fully understand how it works with certain builds. If you don't understand it, basically if you have a matching damage type of your weapon to your subclass, you get double the super energy from those kills, and once you have a full super, you get 20% more damage for 10 seconds. Now, in a nutshell, this sounds really good and works with all of the different light-based subclasses. However, a lot of the buffs are cannibalized by a lot of other things you have. First of all, that damage buff counts as a player damage buff, which will be cannibalized by high energy fire, empowering rift, well, anything that gives you an extra damage to your player. Secondly, the super generation is really nice. However, it does feel like a fluffer where you would just be using it to get your super and then switch to Phoenix Protocol to continue that cycle. Doesn't feel like something that you'd use the entire time. But again, it's something I'm gonna need some more time with before I can make a final verdict. This is just the current level that I understand. And on top of that, it works 0% in Crucible. And that's why it has a 0, is because it just doesn't work. Moving on to number 10, we have the Geomag Stabilizers. Now, this is probably one of the most common exotics you'll see on enemy Warlocks. Definitely, if you see an enemy use their Chaos Reach 6 or 7 times, they're using this exotic. Now, this exotic is really, really powerful for a couple different reasons, and it's a bit complicated. First of all, if you didn't know, sprinting to top off your your super is around the last 10% of the super, which is actually pretty significant, allowing you to save maybe 40 seconds of getting your super. Secondly, built into the subclass itself, the Attunement of Control, as you're using the super Chaos Reach, if you cancel the super early, you get a little bit of super energy back, usually at the maximum of around 50% of your super. So once you get your first super, you use it on maybe 1-2 enemies in front of you, cancel it quickly to get around 50% back, you then only have to get the next 40% and then sprint off that last 10%. So in essence, you are saving 60% of the time for getting your super. And that's really powerful. And there is also that thing where as you're hitting enemies with your Chaos Rich, you get a little bit back into the super energy, and that will give you a little bit amount of super energy back as you cancel, but it's very minimal. And honestly, a lot of people would probably rate this exotic a lot higher, but you have to understand the best part of this is actually built into the subclass. Being able to cancel your super early for super energy and the Chaos Reach super itself is the biggest part. This exotic only makes it a little bit better. Keeping in mind, it changes it from 50% to 40%, and that's about a fifth. And the last note I'll say about this is that in PvE, a lot of people like using this in PvE to make it last a lot longer. However, in the high level play, Master and Grandmaster, because of the lower resistance on this super as compared to the other melee based supers, you're gonna die very quickly, and the enemy is not gonna die very quickly. Like straight up, Geomag versus a enemy champion while it's stunned is not enough to kill that enemy before he starts healing. It's kind of crazy. Coming up at number 9, we have the Lunafaction boots, the quintessential Warlock Exotic for raids. If you want to do maximum DPS, reload as fast as physically possible, and double the range while standing in a well or a rift that's empowering, you need this exotic to help your team. And it's useful in Last Wish, in Garden of Salvation, in DSC, and pretty much every raid we've ever had, and does work with the well. Now, here's the problem. That's not really that useful in most other things. It's not fun to use, it's not that interesting, and even in Master and Grandmaster Nightfalls, you're not really as much focused on DPS as much as you're focused on ad clear and total ammo damage. And obviously, double range is the most benefit you'll get out of it in PvP. But you'll be locked down to a rift, which is not that great. Moving on to number 8 in this top 10, we have the Claws of Ahamkara, allowing you to get an additional melee charge. It does not make your melee charge faster, but it works extremely well with Celestial Fire and the Stasis melee that are currently the best in the meta for PvP. Now, if you don't understand why an additional charge of whatever is important, you have to understand how overflow charging works. Because yes, technically, if you compare, for example, the Armamentarium with the Hallowfire Heart regenerates your grenades and melee a lot faster, but the Armamentarium has overflow charging, and the same concept applies with the claws. Because the fact is, you're not always going to be using your grenade or your melee as soon as you get it. You wait for the right opportunity. And the amount of time that you use waiting for the opportunity could be used on getting your next charge. So on average, you're going to be using your melee around 20 to 70% more often than you would before, and that's kind of hard to beat. The last note I'll say about this is that we currently don't have Solar Plexus in our artifact, but as soon as we do get Solar Plexus, this exotic is going to be a lot better. Not because its perk is good, but because the subclasses are good. And that's why it's at number 8 and not higher on the list, because the perk itself is just an additional melee charge. It's not everything else. Up next at number 7, we have the Ophidian Aspect, an exotic that's actually very simple and is very beloved across the game, but is still very effective. You get better weapon ready speed and reload speed, and your melee range is extended. All three of those things are basically all of the stats that you want for weapons in PvP. Basically, it's quick draw built into an exotic. So if you ever have a weapon that doesn't have quick draw or has very poor handling and reload, it makes them a lot more comfortable. And as you can guess, this is somewhat middling for PvE because you'd rather have damage exotic or super exotic. But in PvP, quick draw is king, especially if they do end up removing quick draw out of Felwinter's Lie, as they mentioned they might do. This is going to be a very good exotic. Moving on to number 6 in this countdown, we have the Aeon Soul. Now, when this exotic came out, to the point of the start of this season, it has been trashed here. Number 1 worst exotic in the game, and now it's at number 6, 8 out of 10 for PvE, and it did for a very good reason. They completely revamped this exotic, changing it from a static perk to a mod slot, allowing you to pick from 3 different mods, which are an exotic tier mod. Now, these different exotic mods will actually give you greater bonuses to your teammates if they also are wearing an Aeon Cult Exotic with a different mod inserted. So if you have 3 people, each with a different mod in it, you're all getting the maximum bonus. Now, I'm not going to go over every single nuance of all of these different mods, but I will pick out a few that I think are going to be really important. First and foremost, we have the Insight one, allowing you to spawn special ammo from finishing an elite, and heavy ammo from finishing a champion or mini boss. And it does only spawn it for your teammates, and it is a smaller brick. It's not the full brick, but that is really significant. The reason these days why we're using so many exotic specials in Grandmaster Nightfalls is because the ammo economy is a lot stronger. We cannot depend on getting enough ammo for Anarchy or Lament, things that generally have really good ammo in the first place, which is why last season Spoils of War was way too strong. You didn't have to use your super energy, and yes, it was specific to champions, but that was so easy to do in Grandmasters. And now we have it into a forever exotic, so we don't have to wait for the artifact anymore. On top of the fact, you can also make your teammates do more weapon damage, you can give them healing, you can give them ability regeneration. All of the different mods are really strong, and I would highly recommend you try them in a team of 3, or maybe even just have one person with the minor bonuses of Insight is really strong. They completely changed this exotic, and I love what they did, and I actually like to see this type of thing work in more exotics, maybe even weapons in the future. Coming up at number 5 in this countdown, we have Eye of Another World. Now, this exotic did surprise me. I have poo-pooed on this exotic ever since it came out with the base game, and to be fair, they did change it at some point. And let me explain why I thought it was bad and why it's actually really good. First of all, being able to highlight priority targets is already nice to have in the Crucible. It's what the one-eyed mask does these days, allowing you to have that silhouette. But that's not what's crazy. When it says it improves the regeneration speed of your grenade, melee, and rift ability, what it means is that it's increasing those stats by 30. So 30 more discipline and strength on top of the stats you already had. And this is why I thought it was really bad, because I usually had in PvP a really high strength and discipline stats. So it capped out those stats. So if you have really low discipline or low strength, you're gonna see a lot more return from that. On top of that, stasis timers are usually longer, so it takes a longer time to get your melee and your grenade. So an increase of 30 to discipline and strength is more effective per second than on regular light subclasses. And if, as you already know, the stasis melee and celestial fire melee are already really strong in the Crucible. So being able to get plus 30 in both of those is really strong. And from what I can tell, it does not give you plus 30 in recovery, it just gives you plus 30 regeneration time for the rift speed. Either way, I honestly had my mind blown by this exotic, and yes, we will be getting a nerf to stasis, so it'll be slightly less effective because stasis is getting nerfed, but even then, like, plus 30 in any stat is just really strong, and we even put Radiant Light and Powerful Friends just to get those plus 20s. So we sacrifice a lot for 20. You should sacrifice for this one as well. Coming up at number 4 today, we have the Nezarec Sin. Not only a very cool looking exotic with an ornament that makes it look even cooler, Darth Vader would definitely be proud, an exotic that people love using in a lot of different builds, including very void based builds. Now, here's the thing. If you did not know, it's void damage kills, increasing the ability energy recharge rate for all 3 of your main abilities, which means you don't have to have a void-based subclass. That's just another source of void damage kills. So you could be using, in the Crucible, a stasis subclass with either Gnawing Hunger or Bottom Dollar, something that's void-based, and still get the benefits from Nezarec Sin. So, for example, if void subclasses are not really that powerful, you don't have to use it, and still use Nezarec Sin and get that bonus. It's a very dependable, very consistent bonus that's around 5 to 10%. However, most people use it with Devour, Attunement of Hunger. And here's where the mistake usually comes in. Devour, the subclass, has a perk on it that allows you to get around 20% of your grenade by getting a kill while in Devour, which is where most of your grenade comes from if you're using Nezarec plus Devour. And it does stack. It allows you to get both of those bonuses at once and get your grenade really fast. On top of it being void based, meaning that you can get void damage kills. So overall, I think this exotic is really strong. I think it's really strong in PvE and PvP, not only for the fact that it's universal for every single one of the different subclasses, and there are a decent set of void-based weapons that can take advantage of this. However, coming up at number 3, we have the Controverse Hold. In my opinion, the superior void subclass-based exotic in the game. Now here's the thing, Nezarec requires you to get a kill. Admittedly, you could get it from a void weapon kill, which is somewhat dependable. but controverse depends on getting a hit, which is a lot more scalable into Grandmasters where enemies have way more health. And when you end up getting that hit, you actually get around 30 to 80% of your grenade back, and it is random between that area, and that's just numbers that I made up. That's what it seems like. And if you're using Attunement of Chaos, allowing you to get the stronger, bigger AoE grenade from charging your grenade, while also having resistance while charging it, makes it not only a lot easier to hit, it makes the grenades do a lot more damage, and you get that grenade a lot faster. On top of the fact that you also get a very strong super, which is even then really strong in Grandmaster Nightfalls. Now here's the one downside to this exotic. In the current artifact, we don't have Oppressive Darkness or Overload grenades, which makes this exotic and Void grenades in general really, really strong. And I have been paying attention, we have not had Oppressive Darkness for 3 or 4 seasons. So it's very likely we're gonna get it again next season. So if you really like this idea, check out a video that I made really recently about an incredible instant Void grenade build. And if Oppressive Darkness comes out next season, use that build. It is going to be really strong all the way up to Grandmasters and really, really fun. I cannot highlight how much fun it is to use this weapon or this exotic. Coming up at number 2 in this top 10, we have the Transversive Steps, an exotic that was so close to getting number 1, and honestly is probably the most used exotic for Warlocks in the entire game. Definitely most used for PvP. Now I don't actually have numbers for that, but from what I've seen on enemies and from what I can see for application, this is the most universal exotic in the game. Now on paper, what does it do? It increases your sprint speed by around maybe like 10%, and after sprinting for a short time, it auto-loads your weapon that you're holding. Now on paper, it doesn't really seem that it's that bonkers. However, not only can you chase down enemies that normally would escape you, especially with the high mobility hunters, you can escape enemies a lot more reliable, as well as combining that with Burst Glide makes it even stronger. You can also give weapons that have really poor reload speed, like certain shotguns, like aggressive frames, and 120 hand cannons, which are really strong right now. You can force them to reload faster and completely forsake their reload speed altogether. Now again, on paper, it doesn't seem like it's that good, but it's not only applicable to every single build out there, every single subclass out there. Going faster will make you survive more almost every time. On top of not increasing your mobility, which means that your jump height is not higher. That's a very common thing these days. You want your jump height to be as low as possible while increasing your speed, which really helps with burst gliding, with Icarus dashing, and just generally being a really speedy boy. And in PvE side of things, going through things faster, like if you're playing just strikes or gambit, getting places faster is just good for your health because you don't spend as much time. And finally, coming up at number 1, for all Warlock Exotics in the game, we have the Phoenix Protocol. Now obviously this is specifically more for PvE focus, but in PvE, in the higher level play, you're going to be picking this exotic most of the time. And that is why it deserves a 9 out of 10, because having a Well of Radiance up nearly the entire time is incredibly powerful. If you've never heard of it, kills and assists that you make, very important, that you make while standing in a Well of Radiance returns super energy. Usually I can get around 50% of my Well of Radiance from standing in my well and getting kills that are not only healing me, but also increasing my damage, making me much more likely to get a kill. On top of my teammates also being able to stand in that well, keeping themselves a lot more survivable, and if they're using like Ursa Furiosa and Orpheus Rigs or even another well to spawn you more orbs, you can have your well up nearly 100% of the time, which is really, really strong. Near invincibility, nearly 100% of the time. Yeah. That's why this exotic is so powerful. Now, outside of Grandmaster Nightfalls, this exotic is not used as much because it's not really that much of a fun exotic. It is mostly an exotic that you need to be able to survive in the highest level play. But in the highest level, oh, it's so good. And that is going to be pretty much the end of the video. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions or concerns about my top 10. And please let me know if you think an item that's not in my top 10 should be in my top 10. Of course, let me know why. If you don't tell me why, I'm not going to be able to know why for the next top 10. And of course, big shout out to my patrons. Again, without their help, these spreadsheets and these videos would really not be possible. It takes a really long time to make them, and they're making it so I'm not grinding my teeth and stressing out, and the ability to feed myself is also really nice. Specifically, I want to give a big shout out to Medi Wuju, Mom, Dad, Charles William, Joe Smith, Monday, Natalie Happens, Steve Bachman, Stephen Rare, Raymond Showman, Unipanther, Cole Sherman, Casey Reagan, a little bit spotty in the middle there, but thank you so much, and I'll see you guys on the next one.